Good evening. Welcome to our 2018 Election Forum series here on WEFS and at FloridaToday.com. I'm Isadora Rangel, your host for the evening and Florida Today's engagement editor. Tonight on stage, we're going to meet the candidates running for County Commission District 4, which covers Viera, Indian Harbor Beach, Satellite Beach, and other parts of Central Brevard. During the August 28th primary, we'll have a GOP primary actually featuring incumbent Kurt Smith and former Commissioner Trudy Infantini. The winner of that primary will face Democrat Matt Fleming in the November 6th general election. And let's go over the rules for tonight. Each candidate is going to have 1 minute to answer my questions, as well as 1 minute for an opening statement and a closing statement. Our forum series is hosted by Florida Today in conjunction with Eastern Florida State College and the League of Women Voters of the Space Coast. And make sure that you watch us again tomorrow evening when we're going to meet candidates running for state house seats, 2 state house seats actually. So we will begin now with our opening statements. The first one to go is Democrat Matt Fleming. You have 1 minute to start.
Can you guys hear me? All right. I'm running as a candidate for county commissioner because I see a huge disconnect between the current people and ideas who are governing this county and the vast majority of people who live here. And that disconnect is evident in the recent death of the lagoon, the fact that we are dumping dirt on the beach, the huge tax breaks we're giving away to big developers, and it's just sort of the messaging and infighting that we continue to hear. I've lived here for 22 years. I will be working day and night, as I already am, to begin to bridge that divide between the government and the community so that we can bring real solutions to these problems.
Thank you. Next is Republican Trudy Infantini.
Hi, thank you for being here today. I'm Trudy Infantini. I'm a certified public accountant. I have been for 35 years. I'm also an accounting instructor at Florida Institute of Technology. Being a county commissioner brings many things, and one of the big things that we do is manage your money, your tax money. I have the financial skill set to do so, but that's why I ran the first time. The reason I'm running this time is because I knocked on 1,000 doors for my opponent because he said he was going to be voting similar to me. Now, of course, not identical, but similar. And instead, he's done a 180-degree turn on some of the most important issues like property taxes and how to fund the lagoon rejuvenation. So I decided I'd take matters into my own hand and I'd run against him this time and knock on those doors for me.
Thank you. Next is Republican incumbent Kurt Smith.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I am the county commissioner. What Trudy says is partially true. I know she walked at least 2 days, so if she did 1,000 doors in 2 days, she's really, really good. And she is correct. I had thought that I would be aligned with her, but shortly before I became the commissioner, after I won the primary, I realized by watching commission meetings that she had isolated herself. She was very unproductive. Her entire 8 years she spent doing absolutely nothing except saying no. And we'll talk about some of those other things going forward. But I want to talk about me. I'm a businessman. I've got 40 years in business, and I've accomplished an awful lot in my 3.5 years here, and we'll talk about that also. But it's a pleasure being here.
May I rebut?
I'm sorry, no rebuttals in the introductions, but that we got to follow the same rules we had in the first one. But you will have 30 seconds when we move to the question.
But okay.
No, I didn't. So we'll start with the first question. What do you see as the 3 major issues facing Brevard County, and what are your ideas for dealing with them? Trudy, you're going first.
Well, one of the biggest issues, 2 of the biggest issues I see are the lagoon and the poison in the water, the groundwater in the Satellite Beach and in Cocoa Beach. I attended a meeting there, and that is one of the biggest concerns because I have children the same age as the children that are now developing cancer or have developed cancer, and some of them have even passed away from the poisoned groundwater. Part of the funding sources that we have are the TDC monies. Fortunately for us, Randy Fine brought up legislation that is going to enable us to use the tourist development money to fund restoration of the lagoon and some of the poisoning that's now taking place, that we're now aware of, that's taking place in our groundwater.
Thank you. Kurt, you're going next.
Well, actually, I think there's 3, maybe 4 issues. The lagoon, one of my favorite subjects. This is a personal issue for me. I live on the Indian River Lagoon. It's not just political. Although I have sat as vice chair and chairman of the Indian River Lagoon Council, which is a 5-county consortium. I've traveled to Washington, D.C. many times to work with our legislators there, Senator Rubio and Congressman Posey. We fast-tracked permitting to make dredging quicker and easier. Jobs would be also high on that list. I've been responsible for, depending on the count, 2,500 to 5,000 jobs. Roads and infrastructure, they're very, very important to me. And I think the third homestead exemption is going to be extremely critical for this county going forward. So with my business background, there aren't any curveballs that I haven't been able to hit, and I'm ready to tackle the task.
Matt, 3 biggest issues in Brevard and how to tackle them.
The 3 biggest issues we have in the county is, number 1, we don't have the community participating enough in the government. That is the source of so many of these problems. If you involve the community in governing, you don't have to wonder if you're getting it right. The second biggest problem that I see is the budget is ballooning. Even though we keep hearing how there's not enough money to give firefighters raises and there's not enough money for roads, where is all the money going? It's going to contractors. The third biggest problem I see is the management of our natural resources. Between the lagoon and the beaches and the St. John's, we need a brand new approach to solving these problems.
Thank you. And let's move on to roads. Brevard has hundreds of millions of dollars in road improvement backlog. How do you propose to tackle this issue? Some of the options which we already discussed in the previous forums are increasing the gas tax or creating a special infrastructure sales tax for such repairs. How would you go about fixing our roads? Kurt, you're going first.
Okay, well, I'm going to do the same thing I've been doing. You know, I heard this issue when I ran the first time, and I adopted it because roads are extremely important. They're not sexy. People don't get all upset about roads being bad, but it's an important subject. If we said we were going to cut libraries or parks and recreation, the room would fill up with pink or purple shirts. We can cut roads, nobody really cares. But roads are extremely important because when a road fails, it costs 5 to 7 times more to repair it than it does to repave it. And if we're not repaving at least 50 miles of roads a year, we're falling behind, and that's what you're alluding to as far as our backlog. When I was chairman, I bumped up road paving from 8 miles to 58 miles. So I know what I'm doing. Again, as I said, I'm a businessman. I know how to get things done, and the proof is in the pudding. 8 miles to 58 miles of roads without raising gas taxes, I think that's a pretty stellar achievement.
Thank you. Matt?
The problem, one of the biggest problems we have with the roads here is that there is sort of a lack of a comprehensive plan that makes sense, that ties everything together efficiently. And that's the product of decades of irresponsible development. Coupled with that irresponsible development has been massive irresponsible tax giveaways. These problems will not solve themselves, and it is going to take a comprehensive approach to creating the funding and the permitting to build new roads, repave old roads, and fix our infrastructure in a way that makes it more stable for the medium to long term.
Thank you. Trudy, how do we pay for roads?
Well, one of the ways I'd pay for the roads is I wouldn't be paving roads that don't need it. We were driving on Morel Road yesterday, and it's being repaved. Now, I can tell you, Hollywood Boulevard, that needs repaving. So does Babcock. But Morel Road doesn't need repaving. We saw, when I was county commissioner, one commissioner pave probably 50 miles of roads that didn't need repaving, and he paved dirt roads. So what's my solution? Let's go back to what was in place back in 2004. They had a book no less than this thick of prioritizing every single road in Brevard County. And one by one, according to the priority list, we would tackle that. If you keep tackling roads out of priority, then you're never going to get to the roads that really need it. I would take all new revenue that comes in from new construction, and I would apply that to roads first.
Thank you. So let's move on to another big issue in Brevard, which is the lagoon. Would you vote to make permanent the current moratorium on conventional septic tanks within 55 yards of the lagoon? If not, what other measures would you put in place to protect the lagoon? Matt, you're going first.
I would absolutely support that moratorium. I was disappointed to see that any septic tanks were approved within, I think it's like 150 yards or up to 300 yards from the lagoon, because they leach nutrients into the system. In addition to that, there is already a citizens effort that needs to be supported in our community. But the county needs to come up with a comprehensive plan to fix the sewers.
Trudy?
Well, I understand, and it sounds and feels really good to require everybody to have this super duper septic tank, and that'd be great. The problem is I feel bad saying, do as I say, not as I do. And the county leaked, 22 million gallons of sewage. They just dumped it into the lagoon. Yet I don't want you leaking any of your nutrients on your property. Do you see where there's something wrong with this picture? I can't be that person. I can't tell you to go out and spend $6,000 or $10,000 on your home when I won't prioritize, and I'll go buy AstroTurf so I have great playing fields for the kids, but I'm not going to put sleeves in those pipes that are failing. I'm going to wait till they bust. And you want to talk about roads costing more money to fix after they're deteriorated? Fix a bursting sewage pipe that's blowing into the lagoon. Now that cost a lot of money.
Kurt, should we make our current septic tank moratorium permanent?
Well, I would, and I was the moving force behind that. I have an aerobic treatment unit on my own septic system. I live on the Indian River Lagoon, and for the information of the folks here, studies have shown that septic systems that are within 150 feet of a tributary, whether it's a lagoon or a creek, a family of 4 leaches approximately 12 pounds of nitrogen and 9 pounds of phosphorus per year. So on my very street, there was a very small lot with a big house, and their septic system failed. And I went to the Brevard County Health Department and said, did you require an advanced treatment unit? And they said, we can't. And I couldn't believe it. So I went to our own Eden Bentley, our county attorney, and she looked it up and she said, yes, we can. So we're putting moratoriums on leaking septic systems, and if you have a small system, then if it fails, you're going to have to upgrade it.
Thank you. So our next question is related to that. Brevard is enjoying significant population growth. Given all of our infrastructure issues and with the lagoon, do you believe the county should continue to encourage new construction, or should it change to a more slow growth policy? Trudy,
Well,
you're going first.
I don't know. If we're going to keep spending $1.5 million on the EDC, the Economic Development Commission, to bring in new jobs, it seems silly to say we shouldn't have growth. So then are you asking me, should we get rid of the EDC to stop? Well, because if we want to slow down growth, we should probably eliminate the EDC, and therefore we would save $1.5 million in our budget. So I'm for smart growth. I'm not for going out and attracting businesses. Brevard County, you know why you came here. It's the same reason why I moved here. I don't know how many people in the audience or our viewing audience, our original home residents here, were born and raised here. I wasn't. I moved here because of this county. And I know that businesses are coming, and they're actually staying because they love Brevard County.
Thank you. Kurt?
Well, I want to remind people that 70% of the public have voted for economic development, I think 3 times since 2000. And so that message is loud and clear to me. If I was a commissioner in Indian River County where they don't care about economic development, I wouldn't be pushing so hard. But I know you folks do. And so I've been to places like Washington, D.C. and Colorado Springs at the Space Symposium to try and bring businesses here. And I've done exactly that. I was involved with Blue Origin, which is going to bring $32 million a year in salaries here. That's just one company. Northrop Grumman, since I've been in office, has grown from 2,000 employees to over 5,000. And right now they're looking for another 250 people. So controlled growth is what we are doing. You can just look at Vieira for a perfect example, but controlled growth is where we're going, what we're doing, and we're on the right track. We need to keep doing what we're doing.
Matt?
I don't think that government, at least local government, has a whole lot to do with controlling the rate of growth. I think that's macroeconomic pressures. You know, the rate of growth has a lot more to do with, especially in Brevard County, like federal funding for programs, just the housing market in general. What we can do is work towards smart growth, which means, you know, trying to develop our urban centers in a way that is good for business owners and good for community members, and also to sort of limit the outward sprawl of development into the wetlands and the St. John's, because that's our drinking water. But that's smart growth in terms of development. Smart growth also involves investing in pro-growth sectors of the economy.
Thank you. And Trudy, you brought up the EDC, the Economic Development Commission of the Space Coast. My question is, the county currently gives over $1 million a year to the EDC. Do you support continuing that funding? And has the EDC been effective in attracting new businesses to Brevard? Kurt, you're going first.
Okay, well, we actually give them $1.4 million, and they've been very, very effective. Linda Weatherman is the leader of that group, and she's just a ball of fire. She's on the go 24 hours a day, it seems, and she's attending these conferences all over the country to try and bring businesses here. One of the most hilarious things I've heard since I've been in office is, well, they would come here anyway. Well, you know what? We're one of 67 counties in Florida. We all have sunshine, we all have palm trees, so what's the difference? Why would somebody want to come here rather than somewhere else? Well, we do have the spaceport, there's no doubt about that, but Blue Origin, I've heard that story from other people that Blue Origin would have come here anyway. Well, they didn't come here anyway. They came here because of economic incentives. We were able to give them $8 million, most of which came from the state. However, they also wanted to build a rocket engine assembly plant. They didn't come here with that because they got $35 million from Huntsville, Alabama. We weren't able to give them more than $3 million. So they're not coming here anyway. They come here for economic incentives.
Thank you. We'll move on to Matt. Your thoughts on the EDC?
The EDC is an incredibly valuable thing. It incentivizes business growth in sectors of business that fit with what already exists in the community. The problems that we've seen with the EDC stem from a lack of vetting these businesses. In the case of comprehensive health services, which I'm not 100% sure that they got money from the EDC, but they did get tax abatements from the county, that they had been sued a couple years earlier for defrauding taxpayers. So if we're giving tax breaks to businesses, they need to be vetted, and I think it's important to ask the question, what are they contributing to the community other than just jobs? Are they, and is this business paying for itself, and what are the positive benefits it brings to the community?
Trudy?
Right now, Brevard County is almost at full employment. So to be spending $1.4 million every year when we're about to lose $12 million due to the new property tax homestead exemption, I think that that would be an easy place to go find $1.4 million. And we actually gave Blue Origin $8 million of your tax dollars. It didn't come from the state, it's coming from you, the taxpayer. Unfortunately, we don't have $8 million cash to give Blue Origin up front. So what the commission is doing is they're suing Brevard County for the right to be able to go borrow money so that they can give Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos, $8 million up front rather than pay him installments over the next 6 years. We even gave Walmart $3.7 million in tax breaks. I don't think they need those tax breaks. We need those tax dollars to fund our roads, and that's what I'd do. I'd stop giving away money, and I'd keep it to fix our roads.
Thank you. And still on the same topic, do you support giving companies property tax breaks to relocate here, such as the $147,000 break that was recently approved for a medical products manufacturer in Palm Bay? Matt, you're going first on tax breaks.
You have to take a look at that on a case-by-case basis. I think that if it's generating more money than it's costing, it's a positive thing, but it should be looked at on a case-by-case basis. How does it fit with the community, et cetera?
Thank you. Trudy?
The voters approved tax abatements. A tax abatement is when a property owner occupies a piece of property, and for 10 years we tell you, you don't have to pay property tax. Blue Origin isn't ever going to pay any property tax, but instead, once they get their CO, we're going to give them $8 million. They won't pay any property tax at all because they're on tax-exempt property. So they're not going to be paying for any of the infrastructure they're going to be using. The roads, the sheriff, the jail, the fire department, all of those things they're not going to be paying for because they don't have to pay property tax. So I can't say that I'm for. I mean, I will use tax abatements on a case-by-case basis only because you, the taxpayers, voted for it. But giving money up front, no, not at all. You didn't vote for that. I did ask that you have the opportunity to vote on it when I was on the board, but the commission shot me down. They didn't want to include that on the ballot.
Thank you. Kurt?
Well, tax abatements work. They act as an incentive to bring good companies here. As far as Blue Origin, yes, they're not paying taxes because we own the property. The good part about that is if they ever leave, we get to keep the $220 million building that they built. So it's not a bad thing. And I understand as a businessman, return on investment. If I were to give you $8 million and you were to give me $32 million a year in return, that seems like a pretty good deal to me. Maybe some other people don't think that way, but as a businessman, I do. And as far as Walmart, it was $2.95 million in property tax breaks. But if that was a vacant piece of property, we'd get no taxes from it. So we really didn't give them anything. And in return, for that first 8 years, we're still collecting $5.5 million from them in property taxes that we would not have gotten had they not come. So again, you have to look at it through a businessman's eyes.
Thank you. So let's move on to community redevelopment agencies. There have been several success stories documented as well as failures throughout the state. Do you support the continuation of CRAs and their use of property tax dollars to revitalize declining urban areas in our communities? Trudy, you go first.
Actually, I'm not in favor of CRAs. It's not a surprise. CRA money, the way it comes into CRAs, it goes into one area of the county. Let's use my glass, my cup. It's going to go, the property tax dollars that are collected in this area get to stay here. But the property tax dollars that are collected on the rest of the table go to fund all of your county services. Well, the problem is they're not taking and funding county services that they're using to the extent all the rest of us taxpayers are. So I'm not in favor of it. The reason why we have CRAs is we wanted to create little pockets of money where some people get to control, a small group of people get to control those funds, rather than let the county commissioners, who ultimately should be responsible for that money, decide if that project is needed. Case in point, they put up new streetlights on 192. They're big, tall streetlights, and I can tell you, I would have gone to Sam's, regardless of those cool streetlights or not. I can tell you, it's a waste of our money.
Thank you. Kurt?
Well, CRAs, and most people don't know anything about CRAs, but they're community redevelopment agencies, and they do. They suspend paying taxes to the county while they improve a blighted area. And as the tax value goes up, they keep the tax money instead of giving it to the county. I understand the purpose. I understand it works. The problem I have is they never go away, and Brevard County, being the bank, never gets paid back. So one of the things that I did while I've been a commissioner for 3.5 years, I got all the CRAs and the cities involved in a room, and we sat down and we worked as adults, and I told them, listen, I want to see these things end. So we've worked out interlocal agreements with 6 of the CRAs already, and they have a finite time. They will cease to exist, and we've even gotten several projects done, like Babcock being resurfaced by the city of Melbourne. So one more thing that I've accomplished.
Matt, your thoughts on CRAs?
I don't think we should end all CRAs. I don't think we can. I think that's a decision that's made at the state. But I will say this. It is one of the most abused, and the abuse is some of the most damaging abuses to governments across the state, because it does take money away from the government, from new development. But there are success stories. If you look at the O'Galley Arts District, the CRA there has created this vibrant community. It was used as it was designed to redevelop a blighted area. And I think you do have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. And I would absolutely support a lot more scrutiny of them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And hotel bed taxes that are paid by tourists are currently going to projects such as beach restoration, tourism facilities, and AstroTurf at the Vieira Regional Park. Since recent legislation allows these dollars to be spent on the lagoon and road and sewer infrastructure, do you think the county should revisit how it's spending these dollars? Kurt, you go first.
Well, we've already done that. I made a proposal to the EDC to start funding some lagoon projects, because now we can. And they came back with a proposal of $1 million with matching funds, so it could be as much as $3 million. As I said before, the lagoon is a personal issue for me. It's not just political. And again, one more accomplishment on my part. I want to mention, too, that with the CRA monies that we saved by my shutting down the 6 CRAs, we've saved $1.9 million going forward, and we're using those for roads. So one more chalk mark for Kurt Smith.
Matt?
The TDC is an area of special concern for me. The lagoon is a personal issue, I think, for a lot of people. As someone who has spent hundreds of days and nights fishing and camping in the lagoon, I've witnessed it die over the last 10 years. And the TDC, the TDC fought the effort to use any of its money on lagoon infrastructure projects, and I think that was really unwise, not only from a public relations perspective, from the simple fact that the lagoon needs money to be fixed. And the TDC is also, meanwhile, while they were fighting to spend money on the lagoon, they were spending money to dump dirt on the mid-reach portion of the beach, which runs in our district from Pineda down to Indy Atlantic. It really, as a personal observer of it, it was sort of stunning to see how irresponsible that was handled.
Trudy?
Well, when I was on the county commission back in 2016, I made a motion to pass a resolution declaring the lagoon our #1 priority, and I wanted to use TDC funds. I was fought right and left by the commissioners, including Mr. Smith sitting to my left. He didn't want to vote. He didn't second my vote to make the lagoon a #1 priority. He still won't make the lagoon a #1 priority of the TDC. Instead, he made it a #2 priority. I would make it a #1 priority of the TDC funds, because the lagoon is in the center of everything. I have boaters telling me they are going to sell their boat because they've been going up and down the lagoon, the Indian River. They're not catching anything. Everything is dead. It's going to stop tourism. So if tourism dollars don't start funneling into there, you're not going to have any tourists coming here. People are going to be afraid that they'll be sickened by going into the lagoon, and they need to get it fixed.
Kurt, would you like your 30-second rebuttal?
Yeah, I would. Just simply put, the TDC money belongs to the TDC. It's not your property taxes. It's TDC money that they collect for bed tax. There are strict rules by the state on what they can spend that money on. You could not spend the money on the lagoon when she made the motion. So it was really silly to make that kind of a motion because it wasn't going to go anywhere. So why would I second it? It's only been this year that that the TDC could change the purpose of money spent. And another misconception is, sorry, I'm done.
Thank you. So let's move on to our next question. The County Commission recently voted against allowing a proposal on the November ballot to ask voters to approve a property tax to fund the Children's Services Council. Do you support the Commission's decision? And does the County Commission have a responsibility to support funding for programs for children with physical, mental, and emotional challenges? Matt, you go first on the Children's Council.
I was a little shocked by that vote. I thought, how can you vote against kids in an election season? I am not as familiar with the nuts and bolts of that as I need to be. It's an incredible amount of information I'm digesting. But I got the sense that the real conflict was where was the money going to go versus what was it going to do. And I think it's an excellent idea, and we should not give up just because it failed to pass a vote once.
Thank you. Trudy?
Well, actually, I'd like to devote my 1 minute to something else. It was presented to the board once Representative Fine's bill passed that the TDC money could go to the lagoon, and when Commissioner Tabaya brought it forward and said, why don't we reverse this $15 million we're going to be spending between AstroTurf and a new museum, and let's put it toward the lagoon, it was voted down by all the others on the commission, including my opponent. And so while it may not have been approved at the time, actually it was legally lawful, but we'll say it wasn't.
I'll ask that you stick to the question at hand here on the Children's Services Council. Go ahead.
But I just wanted to use my 1 minute on the things that I think the people really want to know about this. I think they want to know that 15 million could have been diverted toward the lagoon.
I just ask you to answer the question at hand. You have a few seconds left on the Children's Services Council. Your thoughts on it?
I tried to get rid of the Children's Service Council for 8 years when I was on the county commission, and that was because we met every year for 5 minutes. Every year we met for 5 minutes, and we wouldn't meet again for another year.
Thank you. Your minute's up. Kurt, your thoughts on the Children's Services Council?
Well, the Children's Services Council, as the sitting county commissioner for District 4, it was one of the things that was brought to me, and I spent time with those folks in my office, and I quizzed them. I have two objections. One, I'm a big charity guy. My wife and I give away a lot of money, but it's not my job as a commissioner to give away your money. And as much as it tugs at my heart to help these kids, the Children's Services Council has been around since 1990. And if they really want this thing on the ballot, they could have gone out and gotten petitions signed. Then it would be on the ballot, and it wouldn't be up to the commissioners to make that decision. So I think you people, the voters, have a right to vote on it if they get enough signatures signed on their petitions.
Thank you. The next question is, do you support the Commission's recent decision to allow county employees who have concealed carry licenses to bring their weapons to work? And please explain your position. Trudy, you go first.
I do believe in an employee's right to carry a concealed firearm. As long as they have a concealed carry permit, many of us went out and got it. I know I went out and got my concealed carry permit in 2009. I would like to have the right to defend myself anytime, and I'd like to have the right to be able to defend my children. And I don't take that right lightly. I'm very, very careful and responsible with it, but I also don't try to pass off the responsibility of protecting my family when and if I have the ability to do so myself, and that's what I've done. So I fully support it.
Kurt?
Well, I've been endorsed by the NRA, and I firmly believe that if bad guys can bring guns into the county, then county employees have the right to defend themselves. I know that some people that don't agree with that, but if you put a gun on this table, that gun's not going to kill anybody. that gun can only kill somebody if somebody picks it up and points it at someone else. And I want to be able to defend my employees. I want to defend my family. And so I have a carry permit also. So I'm fully in support of people that have carry permits, that have gone through the training. They can carry their weapons on the job.
Matt?
I think it is important to respect people's gun rights. At the same time, I'm always floored by the irony of people who have been rattling sabers for years about arming the government. We have to protect gun rights because the government is big and scary and it's coming to get us. But now we're arming the government. I'm always been confused by it. I think the Second Amendment's important. Unless there's a need, I don't think government employees really need to be armed at work.
Thank you. Voters in November will vote on a proposed constitutional amendment to increase the property tax homestead exemption, which could cause the county to lose as much as $12 million a year in tax revenue. What would you do related to the county budget if voters approve this measure? Kurt, you're going first.
Well, this is a scary proposition, folks, because I can tell you that we don't have $12 million. We're the only county in the 67 counties in Florida that have a charter cap, which means we also have a budget cap. And so it makes it very difficult for us to fund an awful lot of things. So for us to take a $12 million hit, it would be disastrous. I want people to understand that although it sounds good to many people, I've had people say, hey, tax break's a tax break. Well, the problem is that the reality is that there's 43% of the properties in Brevard County now that are homesteaded, but only 22% of them will qualify under this third homestead exemption. So that means the 78%, the rest of the 78% of you will be subsidizing the 22% that do qualify. So I think people really need to think long and hard before they vote for this thing.
Matt?
$12 million represents about 1% of the county budget. It is not some kind of impending catastrophe. $12 million could be saved by simply auditing the contractors who are providing services for the county. When I hear that we're paying $300 a lock for door locks on a wholesale order, I know that we have a problem. When I hear that we're paying $100 a foot for sewer pipe installation, we have a serious problem. $100 to put in a foot of pipe, all you're doing is digging a hole and putting a pipe in the ground. And even if that takes a little bit of specialized equipment and digging under sidewalks, that's an outrageous amount of money. So we can easily find $12 million in the county budget.
Thank you. Trudy?
I'm a certified public accountant, and I've been an auditor for, I've been a certified public accountant for 35 years, auditing people's books and records and looking at financial statements and budgets. And I can tell you $12 million in a $1.2 billion budget is nothing. And right now, I could rattle off 3 things that would pay for it. Blue Origin, $8 million. The EDC, $1.4 million. And Walmart, $3.7 million. Right there, that's $12 million. 2 companies and 1 EDC when we're at full employment. That wasn't so hard, was it? Look, bam, done. Problem solved.
Thank you. What are your plans for making Brevard County more resilient in the face of climate change and sea level rise? Matt?
That is a challenge. And I think anyone that studied the issue knows there is no simple answer to that. I think it's important to understand what climate change and sea level rise entails. It is not this rapidly approaching catastrophe that some are making it out to be, but we are seeing increased flooding. We need to stop building in floodplains, I think would be a good place to start, because that doesn't cost anything to do. Beyond that, we do have to take a look at infrastructure. Where is water going to be getting into things as we experience more flooding that's going to cause damage? And over time, we really do have to consider how do we sort of unbuild some areas that, in the next 100 years could experience inundation.
Trudy?
I'm not terribly concerned with climate change. The weather changes all the time, and I'm not personally concerned about it, but I am worried. We do have areas that are very close to the water. At times, the beach washes away, and if we would stop pouring more and more sand on there, more of the beach will erode. What we need to have are plans so that people are not permitted to build so close or rebuild if it does wash into the ocean. I'm not sure why oftentimes if something collapses into the water, oftentimes we're allowed to rebuild. I've seen it done on rivers where people have rebuilt after they flooded out. I don't think it's a good idea, so perhaps in many cases we shouldn't be building quite so close to the water.
Kurt?
Well, resiliency is an interesting topic, and I've had numerous people into my office to speak to me about it. Satellite Beach has resiliency plans. Some other communities do as well. I can tell you the Transportation Planning Organization, they look at transportation, roads, and I sit on that board. And they are looking at ideas and ways to raise the level of the causeways to the barrier islands. Transportation Planning Organization does planning. They look out 40 years, and that's the way they try and plan. And it's very interesting to see that they operate that way. So climate change is something they're very concerned about. Myself, I'm not a scientist, so maybe not so much for me, but I'm willing to listen to people that know a whole lot more than I do before I make up my mind one way or the other.
Thank you. And the county recently decided to stop giving grants to nonprofits and charities. Do you think the county should change that decision and continue to provide grants for such nonprofits, such as ones that help the homeless and other causes, or even Meals on Wheels, which it eventually got funded this year, but funding is uncertain for future years? Your thoughts on funding for nonprofits? Trudy?
I don't believe it's my right to go into your pocketbook and decide which charities you will donate to. I just don't think that that's my privilege, and so I don't want to do it. I've tried to do away with funding not-for-profits. I shouldn't be able to pick the winners and losers, and I've seen an awful lot of winners out there. I mean, we have some amazing not-for-profit organizations, but what you may not know is the county also receives money. I actually audited it when I was auditing for the clerk of court, Scott Ellis, and I saw where people that need money because they can't pay their rent, they can go to the county. When people can't pay their electric bill, they can go to the county. We have SHIP funds and we have CDBG funds. We have many different pockets of money that they get federal grants for that are used for that very purpose. But we also have churches. Back when we lived in Melbourne Beach, my husband and I would prepare food for Chapel by the Sea. And sometimes they would tell us they had a family there that needed food. We would give them free food.
Kurt?
Well, I sat on the board when we made the decision to scale back on the CBOs, the charity-based organizations. And my feeling at the time was, and I believe I was the one that led the charge on that, as I already told you folks, I don't believe it's my purpose as a county commissioner to tell you what charities you should be funding through the government. You should make those decisions yourself. It shouldn't be the county commission making those decisions. But it was impressed upon me that if we cut those CBOs off at that point, which was 3 years ago, it would be very, very difficult. So I agreed that going forward, let's cut them back 20% a year or $100,000 per year. So at the end of 5 years, they have plenty of time to become accustomed to the fact that they're not going to have that funding.
Matt, your thoughts on the county giving grants to nonprofits?
I think giving grants to nonprofits is an excellent thing. It's something that benefits the community at $1 per benefit that, you know, there has to be a real vetting process, but you don't take away funding from Meals on Wheels. You know, it is just an example that jumped out at me. That was actually one of the things that made me decide to run for county commission, because I realized there was a sort of vacuum of understanding of how things work in the community when I saw that. I do think that the county can have a grant program for nonprofit organizations. I think there's nonprofit organizations right now that are benefiting tremendously, and the community is benefiting tremendously because of it. If you look at the work Keep Brevard Beautiful does, they're everywhere, and they are, in fact, keeping Brevard beautiful. So it's something I support.
Thank you. Now, moving on to taxes, kind of an open-ended question, but I want to hear your thoughts on it. Would you change anything in how the county levies taxes and how much taxes are levied by the county in terms of property taxes? Kurt?
Well, property taxes are based on the value of your home and the millage rate, which is the tax rate. The county commission controls the decision, and they make the decision on what that tax rate is going to be year to year, the millage rate. It's very complicated. I'm not going to try and explain to you aggregates and rollbacks and things like that. Let me just say that the commission makes the decision based on the needs of the county, what that millage rate should be, and approximately how much revenue that will bring in. The 3 years I've been on the board, all 3 years, we have voted and we have passed on property tax rate decrease to each and every one of you. So I know by definition we raised taxes in 2015 and 2017, but I would venture to say that, in fact, I'll make this challenge. All the people in District 4 in the last 3 years whose property taxes went down, if they would vote for me, I would win in a landslide.
Matt?
I wouldn't know where to begin to address the complex issue of taxes in under a minute, and I'm not as well qualified to talk about it as Trudy Infantini is, as I'm sure she will. I think it's important to take a look at how we are raising money, what the impacts are in the community, and I do have the skills and ability to read through a spreadsheet, and not just a spreadsheet, but real policies and understand what the impacts and outcomes are. My degree was in international business at the University of North Florida. So taking a look at how taxes are done, I don't think we should make radical changes, but I think there are probably a lot of ways that we can make it better for the average citizen and worker and homeowner here in Brevard.
Trudy?
The county collects property taxes based on the value of your home. And then, and I'm going to use this sheet of paper, which happens to be one of the notices of tax increases that you received that went out, that was published in Florida today in 2015, and then another one published in 2017. So your property taxes did go up. What it means is, collectively, the three of us, if we pay $100 in property tax this year, if our property value goes up, well then, so will our taxes. If the county doesn't decrease the tax rate down to here, then we will be paying in more than $100 collectively in property taxes. When he says that he decreased rates, he did decrease rates, but he increased taxes. So collectively, we may have paid in $130. Now, Matt may have paid less, while Kurt and I may have both paid more, or maybe just one of us. The point is, you would have paid even less had they lowered the rates so that their revenue was the same. Spending increased every single year while he was in office. I can tell you that.
Kurt, you have 30 seconds.
Well, I can just point out that the property taxes on the commissioner to my right, on the house that she lives in West Melbourne, that happens not to be in District 4, they went down. The actual tax amount paid went down in the years that she's been living there, which I believe is 2. So again, for me, if my tax bill is less this year than it was last year, I don't care what definition you use, I paid less taxes, and that's what I'm talking about.
Trudy, I know he brought up your where you live, so I'll give you a chance to clarify the record. Do you live in District 4 or in West Melbourne, like you said?
I live in District 4, but right now my home is under, well, actually I had to report my home to code enforcement. It's a condominium, and I tried to get it repaired after the hurricane, and since December we've been trying to get the wall repaired. Right now, the exterior wall is still not up, and so the interior wall, there's not even drywall. All you can see are the 2x4s. There's Visqueen, on the interior wall, and the exterior wall is still plywood. So I'm not sleeping in the bedroom there until
Thank
they
you.
fix the wall. I hope you understand that living with mold is not something that's acceptable.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so the next question is actually related to the state
So
legislature.
wait, I'm the only person does anybody else get a single personal question?
Well, he made a claim about you. I was just giving you an opportunity to respond.
Okay,
I thought it was fair.
thank you.
You're welcome. So the next question is, several state legislative efforts this year were aimed at reducing home rule over such things as landscaping restriction and other topics. Do you support that trend toward more state control, or do you believe local municipalities and counties need to maintain at least their current level of control over local policies? Matt, you're going first.
That's an incredibly complex question. I do lean towards home rule. I think you get better policy when the people who are being affected by the policies are there to participate in those discussions. We have seen this sort of insidious effort at the state level to take away some very important type of home rule protections. Chiefly among them for me is the protection, the customary use ordinances for the beach. They didn't just remove customary use as a protection for the public statewide. They then went a step further and made it so localities couldn't pass their own customary use ordinances to replace that. That's something that I will be a fierce advocate in Brevard County against those kinds of negative state interventions in how we govern our local communities.
Trudy?
I completely support home rule. I do believe that local government is, at best, is the best way to have government. The closer you are to the people that are making decisions for you, the easier it is to reach them and help them make informed decisions based on all of your input. So I completely support home rule charter.
Kurt?
I'm very supportive of home rule. I think that it's dangerous precedent that some of our legislators in Tallahassee have decided that they should impose home rule on us. I understand some of the reasoning. I've spoken to some legislators, and they believe counties that are very liberal shouldn't be so liberal, and that they, being more conservative in Tallahassee, they should impose their conservative wills on the legislative bodies, the commissioners in the more liberal areas. It's a very dangerous precedent, because at some point, we all know the revolution of politics, at some point Democrats are going to take over, liberals are going to take over in Tallahassee again. What happens when a conservative county like Brevard here has to deal with those people and they say, you should be more liberal? I think it's a very dangerous precedent, and I'm very, very much in favor of home rule.
Thank you. And now a campaign finance question. Please tell us who your 3 largest campaign contributors are and their relationship to you, if any. And to follow up, do you accept any money from special interests and corporations and companies? And the first one to go is Trudy.
The biggest person contributing to my campaign is sitting out there in the audience. It's my husband, but actually it's us. So that's the biggest the contributor to my campaign is my husband and I don't actually know who the other 2 are. I mean, I didn't actually look at my campaign report. There's not a whole bunch on there, but I mean, I don't have. I'm not supported by every special interest group, and I wasn't. My campaign wasn't contributed to by the 2 head Democrats in the county, Robin Fisher and Kendall Moore, who supported and actually helped host a fundraiser for my opponent. So, Kurt Smith. So I don't know.
Thank you. Kurt?
Well, $1,000 is the most anyone can give a candidate. I have no idea how many $1,000 contributors I got, but I got a lot. I've got a lot of $50 contributors. I'm a very popular candidate, and I'm not patting myself on the back. It's just fact. I've got people from Sheriff Wayne Ivey to former Sheriff Jack Parker to virtually every organization that exists in Brevard County, the Space Coast Realtors, the business community. So I've gotten an awful lot of support, and my total income from these contributions is well over $100,000. I have a lot of broad support, and I'm very happy that those people acknowledge that I've done a really good job as a commissioner, and I've worked hard for the entire community. So because I have broad support, yes, I have contributions from some Democrats, and I have some contributions from NPAs. People can't buy me because they gave me contributions. That's not the way it works, and I've proven that.
Matt?
All three of us sitting up here, the largest donors to our campaign so far have been ourselves, because there is not a limit on the amount of campaign contributions we can contribute to our own campaign. I had to pay $3,500, I think is about where I'm at on that, because my petitions were not counted properly by the supervisor of elections, even after I went in there and presented evidence that in fact they had thrown out good petitions. Beyond that, my next two largest donors, I have no idea. I've taken a lot of little donations, and I'd have to go back and look.
Thank you. So we're almost done. We're going to move on to our closing statements. And because we have very little time left, I'm going to ask you to stick to 45 seconds this time. And we're going to start with Kurt first, your closing statement and why voters should support you.
Well, I humbly ask the voters from District 4 to support me again. I did what I said I was going to do. Jobs, Indian River Lagoon, infrastructure, roads, those are all things that are very important to me. I've proven as a businessman that I can get things done. I know how to work with people. I work with Democrats, NPAs. I work with everybody. I don't think just because you think differently than I do that we can't agree on something. And what really stymies me when I first got into this, I was amazed that there's so many people in this county that would rather argue with the 20% of the things that they disagree with you on rather than the 80% of the things that they do agree on. In other words, if you and I agree on 80% of a subject, why would we not work together and solve the problems of 80%?
Thank you.
Instead of doing nothing with 20%?
Trudy, you're next.
Well, I'd like you to know that when I made campaign promises that I would do everything in my ability as a certified public accountant not to raise your taxes, I never voted to raise your property taxes. I kept my promise. My opponent went campaigning and said he wouldn't raise taxes, and I ran into a neighbor in Vieira, and he said he stood right here on my front porch, and people gathered around, and he said, I'm going to vote just like Trudy Infantini. Yes, and so I will also go back to declaring the lagoon a state of emergency, and now I have the votes. Finally, I have a voting block of my peers, and I should be able to declare the lagoon a state of emergency and continue to keep my promises that I made when I was walking and knocking on all of your doors.
Thank you.
And I hope I earn your vote. Thank you.
Matt, 45 seconds.
If you want real change, vote for me. I am not a part of an establishment that has driven so many things into the ground in this county and excluded so many people, and I am not a part of a national agenda funded by lobbyists to take away home rule and do even more damage. So if you want real change, if you want responsible leadership, if you want smart answers that involve the community to the very real problems that we're facing, and you're tired of the arguments about who raised what taxes, and you're tired about arguments about social issues, and you really want to solve Brevard County's problems, vote for me. I need your support. I need your donations. You can see my website at mattflemingbrevard.com.
Thank you, and thank you to all the candidates. And that's a wrap up for County Commission District 4 Forum tonight. Make sure to come back again at 7 p.m. tomorrow, where we're going to meet the candidates running for Florida House Districts 51 and 52. Thank you.